Good morning. This is Dean with the Two Party Podcast. It's 9/11. It's a day that most Americans should never forget. We were attacked. Our New York City, the Twin Towers were attacked. I like to ask. It's funny. I like to ask people where they were because for most people, there's an answer. Most Americans that were in the country at that time, it's a defining question that most everybody has in common. They know where they were on that date. Um, it For me, I was in Tampa, Florida. I was living in Odessa, Florida, where I kind of grew up on and off. One of the main areas I grew up in that I call home. Uh, I woke up. We were supposed to go riding. A friend of mine, Ron Pasto, and I were supposed to go riding with a bunch of other people up at Croom, and we decided to wake up real early and get an early start, get the trailer going, get everything up there, get the equipment gassed up. And so I woke up real early, as I always do, to get ahead of everything. And so he lived in South Tampa. I was in Odessa, probably a good 20-30 minute drive, depending on which way you went. So I woke up and I always watch back then. I listened to the radio or watched the news, one or the other in the morning, or cop the paper. And immediately I turn on the news and I see the first plane hit. I hear first about the plane circling, and then immediately I hear about the plane hit. So it catches my attention. I start watching. I immediately call Ron and I say, "Hey man, turn on your TV. We just got attacked, or something big's going on." And so he's like, "Whoa, man, this is crazy. Let me let you go. I'm gonna watch this." And so I told him I'd be headed that way. So I hung up with him and I got all my gear ready, jumped in the car, and headed to South Tampa as fast as I could because I didn't want to miss what was going on. So I got over there about the time I got over to his house was about the time the second plane had collided into the building. So that's where I was, and for a lot of people, it's either a good or bad memory. I got friends of mine. Monique's one that comes to mind. I got a bunch of friends that were actually there in New York around Ground Zero at the time this occurred. I've got a few friends that passed away in some of the destruction, and I know a lot of different first responders that were a part of the scene there. So, this is one of those, for me, I am so pro our nation and patriotic, and I am 100% for our country to succeed. And this is an event that to me, well, I'll always remember. I will never forget the fact that our nation was turned upside down, and it's one of those things where the first point I'd like to make is that where we are now, we're in such a divisive situation in our country and our society. We've got two parties going against each other, head to head, neck and neck. Nobody wants to be wrong. Everybody has to be right. It's insane. But the thing that I remember most about 9/11, and maybe a lot of people don't, is the way our nation immediately, everybody from every background and every culture that was in our nation and even around the world, the support we got immediately came together. There was people from every cultural background running in to help. How can we help? Can we get food there? Can we get supplies there? Financial support came flying in. There was people that were just there bringing water and food to the first responders and the firefighters who were taking major shifts back to back, climbing through that rubble, trying to save people and get people out. And thank God for them, and thank God for the people that showed that support. But one of the things upon waking up this morning, and I was thinking about it, I was thinking about it a lot last night. If any of you caught it, I was posting my 9/11 tribute pictures and stuff on all the accounts I can. Every year I do that. It's just I will never forget. It means a lot to me And again, the real memory for me, besides knowing the day and what I was doing that day, is what happened afterwards. And what happened afterwards was our nation came together in the midst of a crisis, an attack, and we'll never be the same. So from that date previous, our nation was what it was, man. It was fun. I just remember, it was always fun having hip hop and freedom and this and that. And there was just so much things that just were just great at that time. I just remember that. And then I just remember that the date of that attack, everything seemed to change. Everything in our nation seemed to change. The tone of people, you were either very skeptical and paranoid, or you were very reserved, or you were very giving. A lot of people, and that's what I remember the most, is people being so giving, people uniting. It didn't matter your color, your culture, what mattered was that you had support and that you were there. That was so awesome. And so I'm gonna kind of reflect on the timeline as just part of what me remembering, and part of me just sharing with the audience, and for those that maybe don't remember, or maybe those that were too young or weren't born, or whatever the situation. I kind of like to reflect on this day. So our country, again, it's just never been the same. We've gone from Department of Homeland Security being put in place, and all these different agencies and organizations, and terror task force, and ever since that day, it's been terror, fear, and our nation's just never been the same. And that's what terrorism is. That's what they wanted. That's what they got. And I just remember for several years there, things changing. I just remember people afterwards coming together. We're not going to let this affect our nation. And then I just remember a lot of people enlisted. A lot of people went in and enlisted. My younger brother was one that went in right around that time. And it's just astounding to see where we were from this tragic event to where we are now in our nation. It makes you think, a lot of people have forgotten. But I'm not going to forget. I'm going to keep letting this live on, because it needs to. The victims and their families, the survivors and their families, the people around the world, the men and women that went to war after this, on Bush's weapons of mass destruction war, and lost their lives, they deserve, and their families deserve to know that we haven't forgotten this. So I'm just going to skim through this timeline. I'm looking right now. I'm reading this off of one of the Newsweek article timeline. It's a timeline of 9/11. And so at 7:59, American Airline Flight 11 takes off from Boston with 11 crew members, 76 passengers, and 5 hijackers aboard. It was originally destined for Los Angeles. At 8:15, United Airlines Flight 175 takes off from Boston with 9 crew members, 51 passengers, and 5 hijackers. It was originally destined for Los Angeles. At 8:19, Betty Ann Ong, a flight attendant aboard Flight 11, alerts ground personnel that the cockpit is unreachable. A passenger has been stabbed and the plane is hijacked. The passenger, identified as Daniel Lewin, served 4 years in the Israeli army, and a report speculated that he may have tried to stop the hijackers. He's likely the first person that was killed during the attacks. So, Daniel M. Lewin, that's a name to remember. This guy sacrificed his life trying to save the people on his plane, not even knowing the extent of what their attack was going to be. So what a hero he really was. 8:20 a.m., American Airlines Flight 77 takes off from Washington Dulles International Airport with 6 members, 53 passengers, and 5 hijackers on board. It was originally destined for Los Angeles. Flight 11 hijacker Mohammed Atta accidentally broadcast a message to air traffic control saying, we have some planes, just stay quiet and you will be okay. Boston, and then at 8:37, Boston's Air Traffic Control Center alerts U.S. Air Force Northeast Air Defense Sector, which mobilizes the Air National Guard to follow Flight 11. At 8:42, United Flight 93 takes off from Newark International Airport with a crew of 7, 33 passengers and 4 hijackers on board. It was originally bound for San Francisco. At 8:46, Flight 11 crashes into floors 93 through 99 of the One World Trade Center, known as the North Tower, severing all 3 emergency stairwells. First responders are dispatched to the scene, and an evacuation immediately begins. And again, this is where I started. This is where I saw it. So we're talking 8:46 a.m. I'm packing up my bags, and I'm getting ready to jump in my car, and this comes on in the news, and I turn it on, and I'm watching, and this is when I called Ron, and I said, man, something's going on. A plane just hit the North Tower. Hey, bud, what are we doing here? And he's like, oh, just, let's come over here, man. I'll be watching this. Let me turn it on. So I rushed over there, So this is at 8:46. And again, everyone in the world, everybody in America not knowing. I mean, anybody woke up and turned this on, or anybody that was there in New York at that time, right around the trade building, nobody knowing what's going on. I mean, this is just out of the blue attack, out of the blue, a plane hitting a building. So then at 8:50, we get President George Bush is told what's believed to be a plane hit the World Trade Center at that time. Bush was visiting an elementary school in Sarasota. Now, I remember this because it was all over the news in Florida where I was at. And I just remember seeing the whole news broadcast of him going to this elementary school that morning and watching, him in there reading and talking to kids and doing what, the press stuff they got to do. So he's in there doing that, and he was told there was likely an accident. At 8:52, a flight attendant aboard Flight 175 reports to an airline operator that a hijacking is underway. At 8:55, a Port Authority fire safety employee tells people in 2 World Trade Center, the South Tower, that it is secure and there is no need to evacuate. Those in the process of evacuating are told to use the re-entry doors and elevators to return to their offices. At 8:59, Port Authority Police Sergeant Al Devana orders both towers to be evacuated, followed a minute later by the evacuation order for the entire complex. At 9:02, a Port Authority fire safety employee announces people may start an orderly evacuation on South Tower if conditions weren't on your floor. I mean, how scary is that? Okay, being say 85 feet up or 85 stories up in the air, and you're being told to evacuate if the conditions allow it for your floor. You're 85 floors above your exit before you're able to get out of a building to safety. Probably another reason I have never wanted to work in a high-rise building. But how absolutely scary for those people to be. I mean, you're just trapped. You can't go anywhere. I mean, even if you wanted to run, I mean, the closest you're going to run is into a stairwell, and you still have 84 flights to get to downstairs to your exit. Horrific to think about. At 9:03, Flight 175 crashes into floor 77 through 85. So again, if you're on 85 or up, I mean, you're kind of screwed at that point. Hits the South Tower. 2 of the 3 emergency stairwells are rendered impassable. 9:05, White House Chief of Staff at the time, Andrew Card, informs Bush that the South Tower was hit and that this was no accident. A second plane hit the second tower. America is under attack. Card told MSNBC were the words he said to the president. Renee A. May, a flight attendant on Flight 77, calls her mother and says the plane has been hijacked. Her mother then calls American Airlines. Minutes after their call, passenger Barbara Olson calls her husband, Solicitor General Theodore Olson, and tells him hijackers took over the flight, and he informs federal officials. Flight 77 at 9:37, Flight 77 crashes into the Pentagon. Now there was a lot of conspiracy theory stuff. There was a lot of skeptics talking about this, and it's funny. I'm reading this timeline because I've even read recently and I know we have a lot of misinformation. If you were there, if you remember this day like I do, there's so much misinformation. Now originally they thought that this is the original story I heard, was the plane had crashed into the Pentagon. And that was what was covered on the news. And you could kind of see a tail wing And that's what was told. Okay. Then it was a missile. Then we were told that this was a surface to air missile or a ground fire missile. So it was definitely a terrorist attack by somebody. And then later on, it was a Cessna. And then later on, it was, the stories went on. And then as the images got cleaned up and you started getting stuff released from Pentagon, and you saw the destruction and how the plane hit and went into the Pentagon and penetrated the building, they started hiding it. They started covering up what the debris. They started it didn't look like a plane at that point. So it was really, it kept you wondering, was this really a missile attack or was this a plane? But the way I remember it and watching it on the news was the Flight 77, a plane actually hit the Pentagon. In the initial pictures and video that were shown, you could kind of tell it was a plane. And the trajectory and the way it hit was, I guess, just very destructive. I mean, it just disintegrated the plane and went into the internal portions of the building. It didn't make it to the center areas, but 9:42, Federal Aviation Administration grounds all flights. At 9:58, Flight 93 is flying low enough to the ground that Edward P. Felt, a passenger, is able to reach an emergency operator in Pennsylvania. At 9:59, the South Tower collapses. And that was, the planes hitting and the whole incident was just mind-boggling. And then right then at 9:59, when that tower went down on the news, I mean, it was just shock, trauma, absolute horror for just the people. And this, I think, one of the saddest parts of it was you could physically watch on the news live. You could physically see the bodies, and people. You could see there was a video that kept replaying of a man jumping, but there was physically you could see people tumbling out of this tower. The people that were left from that tower, and I mean, just horrific to think that their last moments were falling out of a building to their death. And so 10:03, passengers and crew members storm the cockpit of Flight 93. It crashes into Shanksville, Pennsylvania. About 20 minutes flying time from Washington, D.C. Now, my friend Brad, at the time, Brad was living in Emmaus, Allentown. And Brad Kingston, you know who you are if you hear this. He was living up there. I went up there and stayed with him for a little bit and visited, and had a friend of mine, Kyle, that lived up there for a while with him. But right around that time, I mean, they had locked down all air traffic. So around Pennsylvania, this flight was very concerning. So in Brad's area, that was kind of the big concern right there, was that plane, where it was going to go. And that's where it ended up going, was into Shanksville. And then at 10:28 a.m., the North Tower collapses. At 12:16, U.S. airspace closes. At 8:30, Bush addresses the nation from the White House. And the above timeline, it says in this article, the above timeline was compiled from the 9/11 Museum and Memorial, the country's principal institution for examining events and aftermath of the attacks. So that's where I got that information, that timeline. If you want to look back at it, it's nice to have that timeline of the exact events and the time frames they happened and occurred. Kind of helps you, I guess, review or revisit where you were at that time, as well as the time frame you were standing in when these things were occurring. At this point, by the time that second tower was coming down, and I'm going to look back, by the time that second tower was coming down, North Tower was 10:28. So I was already on the road and on my way to Ron's house at that point. So we were, as I remember, we were sitting there on his couch watching this break down. We ended up running our morning late going to ride because this was just crazy. And we did end up finally jumping in the car and going up to Croom and hitting the trails for a little bit. But it really took a toll on our ride that day, and it took a toll on, everything we were thinking and just perspective in life. And, then now what do we do as our whole nation's collapsing, and, the things that mean so much to you at that very moment within a split second no longer really have the value they had, because there's so many lives affected and so many people that you can't reach out to. I remember a lot of my friends trying to call friends and family up in New York, and for a while there, some of the cell towers went down. Local cabled phones went down. So a lot of, there was so much confusion because nobody could get through to anybody. You didn't know if your friend was alive or dead, if they were stuck in the rubble. It was just horrific. But again, I will never forget this event. It's just always played out in my head since the day it happened. I know there should be and will be a lot of tributes today, and I just wanted to give my story on where I was and just share with you that timeline. Maybe try to help you kind of review and revisit. I like to kind of help people, not so much not forget in the terms of, if it's traumatic to you, I don't want you to have to relive it, but I do want you to not forget that this event occurred because it's historic and it changed our nation in ways we're feeling even today. But the main reason I really wanted to get on here, besides just giving this tribute to 9/11, taking a moment of silence to really think about where you were today, maybe take a break wherever you are, is really just to bring back the memory, the good that came out of this, which at the end of the day was the unity. What came out of this after that happened, this event, was phenomenal unity. You saw American flags on every corner, every car, kids walking around with the little mini flags. You saw flags and you saw red, white, and blue everywhere across our nation, everywhere, every person, every culture wearing it and proud to be an American. You saw the red, white, and blue and the stars and bars across the nation, anywhere you went. And if you didn't, I don't know, there must have been a reason for it. But I'll be honest, I never at that time ever saw the American flag become such a fashion statement, become such a symbol, I guess, brought back, resurrected as a symbol that it had been forgotten, you could say, because it was. We pledge allegiance to the flag, and all those things started going away in schools, and some of the patriotism that we some of us cherish had kind of just went to the wayside a little bit. We forgot. I guess we kind of took advantage of, or took for granted the freedoms we have in America until that day, 9/11. And from that day forward, things changed. But man, I will tell you, there was cars wrapped, painted with red, white, and blue. You'd see antenna flags flying, people with banners on their trucks and flags flying from their trucks. It was a very interesting change and turn. But the biggest thing was that our nation, all Americans from every background, even people that weren't American that lived here, that this was their new home, even people around the world in other countries felt compassionate about that this was a horrific event, but they all came together in support of us. So I just want to, remind you that that's not too far from where we can be. That's not a place where we can't go again. And I think we're at a point in our nation where we need that. We need it, we don't need another bad event. Don't take it out of the wrong turn. We don't need another traumatic event to bring this nation together. What we need is for this nation to just come together, because we don't need a tragic event. So we need all this nonsense to stop so that we can just come together. We don't need a reason to come together. That's the thing in America. The freedom we have is we have the freedom to just come together. Other countries and nations don't. There's not places that always have that. They don't have the freedoms we have here in this nation, and they don't have the free markets we have in this nation. We need to start looking into nurturing that value that we have, the freedoms that we have, to come together, to be there for each other, and to love and care for each other like we never have. And on that note, I'm going to sign off. So I just want you guys to know we're with you today. All of you families, the victims' families, the survivors' families, the first responders' families, the people that had to go to war over this, we're with their families. Sad and tragic event. We will never forget the sacrifices of all that were involved in this. And we will not forget the horrendous cowardice act of these hijacked terrorists to do what they did. Any act of violence toward any person, nation, whatever it may be, any act of violence initiated is a coward. We're at a stage in our day and age, we can be diplomatic and we can communicate. And that means on every level. That means the person you face in the grocery store, in traffic, no matter who it is, we can be diplomatic about it and have an adult conversation. There is no need for violence. There's always a need to defend yourself, and you should always do so if need be. And I encourage that. But there is never a need for violence. It's just not acceptable. It's just not anymore. So on that note, this is Dean Tedder, Two Party Podcast, signing off. You have a great day, and I hope a lot of you get to see some of these memorials today and can remember and spend some time and reflect on this. And for those of you that pray for the families, pray for the people around the nation that are still feeling this pain. You have a great day.